Welcome to Soul of Travel podcast. I am so excited today to be bringing Mollie Busby to the show and to talk about mindfulness in business, living aligned with your values, like dreaming big, huge dreams, and off-grid living, which is so many fun things that we get to talk about today that are pretty unique in this space. So, Mollie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Um, just for our listeners, a quick connection between Mollie and I. I feel like 2 years ago, you would always think I could figure out timelines before I talk, but timelines don't seem like they really exist anymore. I wanted to reconnect to my yoga practice, and I was really like hemming and hawing about committing myself to it, and very aligned with this conversation. I asked the universe for a sign, like after taking a class at Yoga Hive in Montana. And I was like, I feel like this feels like the place for me, but I just can't trust my own intuition. Give me a sign. And I sat in my car, and another friend of mine was doing this big yoga giveaway on Instagram. And I didn't even know what she was giving away, but I just was supporting her. And I'm like, you're awesome. And then she texted me, she's like, you just won this yoga mat and this yoga block and yoga towel. And I was like, okay, universe, that's a pretty good sign. So I ended up signing up for the training, and I'm so grateful because this community has really shifted a lot of things for me and that time. And I'm just so grateful for the connection. So Mollie, I would love to just give you a moment to introduce yourself and let our listeners know a little bit more about you.
Yay. Well, I'm so happy to be here. My name is Mollie Busby. I live in above the Arctic Circle or in the Arctic Circle of Alaska. My husband and I run an off-grid retreat center called Arctic Hive. And people always ask, how did you get the hive? It's Busby, but also bees are a really big symbol in my life. They represent community, among many other things. And that's really what I've spent my life doing. Right after I met my husband just 12 years ago, we started a nonprofit called Riding On Insulin. Sean had started it a long time ago prior to meeting me. It's ski and snowboard camps for kids with type 1 diabetes, as well as other action sports. And so we've been doing that as a part of our world in different capacities for over 12 years. And then along the way, I also found my yoga practice. I kind of out of nowhere, I wanted to do yoga to meet friends. And that, I mean, this is the really short version, but that spurred into an amazing journey of opening yoga studios, creating communities. Now I run teacher trainings, 200-hour trainings, soon to be 300-hour trainings. And I'm just combining all of these things now because of all of the virtual yoga that's happening. It's been amazing not only to be able to be in Alaska, be home with my family and teach, but also now bringing people to Alaska so that I can teach yoga in person really far north in Alaska in the Brooks Range. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think a great place to start, one of the things that really resonated for me in our work together was listening to your business podcast series that you had, talking about how you can apply the Yoga Sutras to business. And I just thought it was such a unique perspective and a unique way of looking at business. And me, I always was trying to find my space in business where I felt like it was something that was mutually beneficial, where I was creating something that was coming from me, supporting others. And just when I listened to this, it kind of took a lot of that like negativity and resistance I had and made me really think about that businesses can be something that are a positive entity and can contribute to others. So I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about how that came to you, and then maybe walk us through some of those ideas so people could maybe see how that might apply to their work, or even make that transition for people to become more spiritually connected, I guess, to their work.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. It's so the podcast that I created is called The Yoga of Business. And it's actually a really great starting point for my journey and kind of talking about how my life has influenced my work. Really early on, I decided I didn't want to work for other people. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit from it as, a child. We used to do like coat check at parties that my parents would have, and we made like a good amount of money. And we had like all of these notebooks or we'd keep track of stuff. Anyway, so business has always been in my life. Both of my parents are entrepreneurs, and so it's just in my blood, and it's in Sean's blood as well, my husband. And so in terms of, when I first got into business, really nonprofit life was my first experience of starting my own. It's not even my own business. Nonprofits belong to the world, but starting a business, something from the ground up. And like you just shared, I think so many business owners go through this, just especially in, a yoga type field, you go through this inner turmoil of like, well, here's the business side of me, but then here's me doing all the things that I love. I just have to do this stuff. I have to get it over with. Sometimes it's dramatic, and it's almost like, and I've always kind of felt like this. I have these aspects of myself that feels like I'm living like a double life or a triple life. Like I used to go to summer camp as a kid, and I loved being in the outdoors. I led backpacking and canoeing trips for like anywhere from 2 to 17 days out in the wilderness in northern Wisconsin and the UP of Michigan. And so that part of myself, I kind of like let it slide, and I got into journalism and fashion, and that's the time in my life when I met Sean. So I had these like double lives, and then we got together. I moved out west, so really the catalyst, and I'm backtracking a little bit, but this is just kind of part of the story. The catalyst for my anything I know about travel started when I met Sean. I did not have a passport when I met Sean. I think I was 23 at the time. Sean had been all over the world, almost to all 7 continents. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll get a passport. And then, he was like, well, do you want to move out west? I was like, sure, no big deal. And we've spent a couple time in a couple different areas. We lived in central Utah, and I didn't even know what Utah looked like, honestly. We lived in Montana after that. I also had no idea what Montana looked like before I went there. So really, Sean, and this is kind of like a thread in my whole story, like he has this sense of adventure. And it's not that I don't, I definitely do, but he's the one with these ideas. And I've gotten more and more ideas as the years go on, but I would have never chosen to move. I would have lived my whole life in Madison, Wisconsin, which is an amazing place to be and to grow up and to live. So anyway, we moved out west, and Sean and I met. It's a really lovely story, also a very sad story. We met at a funeral of a young boy. His name was Jesse. He died at the age of 13 because of complications with type 1 diabetes. And so the reason I met Sean was giving the eulogy at Jesse's funeral. And I worked with Jesse's mom at the time at a women's magazine. And so we were brought together. Michelle, Jesse's mom, introduced us at the funeral. And it just kind of, as they say, the rest was history. But actually, we just started dating, and the rest really was history. And part of the reason we started the initial business, and I think a lot of business owners can relate to this, is, I mean, I think, on the TV shows, people are like, I'm going to start a business and make $1 million, right? But I think a lot of us in small business, we start because of some magical spark in our life where we realize, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. And that's absolutely what happened. Sean at the funeral said, he hadn't been doing these camps that he called Riding On Insulin at the time. And he vowed at the funeral to restart those for Jesse. And I mean, of course, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then getting to know Sean and moving out west and being closer to him and learning what he had done and what we could do with this organization, I was pumped. It was just the perfect reason. And Jesse really had brought us together. That's really the way we saw it. And so I looked at Sean after about 6 months of living out west, or a couple months, and I was like, what about that Riding on Insulin thing? What are we going to do? And we had some contacts that, really wanted us to run a camp in Utah. And I had never seen one before. So we ran one in December of 2010. That was the first camp. I just incorporated at the time a corporation, and then we applied to be a nonprofit right around that time as well. But after I saw it, I was like, because obviously Sean knew what to do, and I had been to camp, but not to a Riding on Insulin camp before. So to see it happen and to organize it and be like, whoa, these kids living with type 1 diabetes coming together and getting to feel normal for the day, because they are normal. They just have an invisible disease, but coming together and sharing stories and, sharing the hard times of anybody living with a chronic disease. It was just beyond. I was blown away. And so that experience really, number one, lit this fire within me, like, we need to do this. Sean had a job at the time, and because I had just moved, I was in between jobs, and I thought, I'm gonna I'm gonna make this my career. And you know, I did. It took a couple years, but we got the nonprofit off the ground. We were running camps in 3 countries. We still would be if it wasn't for COVID. The US, Canada, and New Zealand. At one point we had a staff of 5, and this is like, years 5 to 7 years in of being the executive director of this organization, raising $500,000 every single year to be able to put on these camps across the country, employ people, give back to kids. Really, it was amazing. And starting a nonprofit is no different than starting any other small business. There are those moments where, I mean, it just consumes your life, and you feel like you have to be almost a different person to make some of these business decisions and the hard decisions. And then on top of that, asking people for money, which we're all doing, whether we're a nonprofit or not. We're all putting our proposition out there, because money, I had a consultant tell me this in the beginning, because of course we wanted to do these camps for free. And when we did that, people weren't as likely to show up. And I had this consultant, he said, Mollie, because I was like, well, I don't need the money. We'll just keep doing this. It's the point everybody gets to when they're like, I don't need to make a living. I'm going to keep giving back to these people, and I'll just figure my own stuff out. Right. And he said, Mollie, if you aren't running these camps because you can't sustain a life, no one's going to get these camps. And I was like, dang,
Mm.
okay. That's like such a powerful perspective. And that really shifted it. It's not like you don't want to be cutthroat, because you're giving back, and you need to be able to live, right? We all need to be able to sustain a lifestyle so we can support our family, whatever that looks like. And so, to having this passion project turn into a career, that's where everything really shifted. And so, like, flash forward, I started Yoga Hive, which is a yoga studio that began in Whitefish, Montana, after Sean and I moved there. And we moved in 2013. It started Yoga Hive in 2015 because I just looked out into the community at the time, and there were some great yoga studios. But for me, as somebody, I don't live with chronic disease, so I feel at home in riding on insulin, but also I have this side project of yoga, and I just love it. And I was like, I don't feel at home when I walk in anywhere. I want to feel like, when you walk in somewhere, you're like, yeah, these are my people. This is where I want to be. And so I was like, well, I'll just create it. And it was really fast how it happened. It was within a month of deciding. I was like, well, might as well start a yoga studio, because I had observed my best friend. She opened a yoga studio in Denver the year prior, and I got to really walk that journey with her. And this is part of it too, is community and using your resources. And man, I had great business resources, and I had literally a person who I love, who I watched walk through the same path. And I thought, dang, I could totally do this. So I opened Yoga Hive, and that's really when I started to dive more into yoga and into trainings and learning more about the philosophy and just everything that goes behind and beyond just making shapes with our body. That's when I was really like, whoa, how do I reconcile these two things? How do I show up in business authentically and also follow my dreams, but also do things right? Like, there's a certain thing that you learn in business where when you mess up legally, contractually, insurance wise, I mean, the stuff people don't want to think about, even financially, money wise, when you screw up, you have to learn from that if you're going to continue doing what you love. And it's the stuff that, especially people are like, oh, yoga people, we don't want to worry about finances and whatever. It is empowering to get it together and learn from your mistakes and be able to say, yes, I'm going to show up with my authentic voice. And also, yeah, we're going to sign a contract. We're going to get clear about what we're doing here in this partnership. It's so empowering to get into that position. So Flash forward more, starting yoga studios, I opened 3 in Montana. I work close in partnership with Blaine and in Colorado, who owns Yoga Hive Colorado. And then I opened one in Wisconsin as well. And along the way, what I learned was I could take this philosophy and apply it to my work in business, learning how to be detached from this, what we say, like, I don't know if people like this term or not, like business baby. I personally don't have kids right now. I have dogs, I have businesses all over the country. And for me, I work with a lot of women and I work with a lot of moms, both in Riding on Insulin and through Arctic Hive, through Yoga Hive. Anytime we create something, whether it's as intense, I would say, as creating a human, or intense as creating a business, or creating a hobby, or building a home, right? These are all creations. And so, really, when we take it down to that tiny level of creation, anything we create has to go through the same cycles of creation, sustaining, and then death, right? It's inevitable, even in the journey of a business. And so, applying these principles of like detaching from, like, okay, is my business still relevant? Right? Like with Yoga Hive, when we went through the pandemic, I was traveling. It was super unsustainable for me as a human. I had been traveling one, sometimes twice a month to across the country to different studios, running trainings. It was fun, but I wasn't spending any time with my family, and I just kind of said, well, we'll move to Alaska. I'll just figure it out. And I was in no rush to figure it out because I had no idea what I was going to do. And then when everything shut down and everything went online, it was like the universe said, here you go. This is your chance. Take this, run with it. And this is how you're going to be able to have a family and operate this business. And it's those little clues, right? Those little, if you're not paying attention, if you're not, meditating or having that self practice every day to be able to notice the signs, you don't see them. And I saw it. And I was like, this is the answer. And then flash forward, we've been doing 200-hour trainings 100% on Zoom for like 2.5 years. And people say, oh, it's so much time on Zoom. But I don't know, maybe you can attest, like, it's magical how close
Mhm.
you feel to people, like, right away. So all these principles now, where I am today, running a retreat center, still running trainings. I still own a studio in Wisconsin. I've since sold the Montana studio to a dear friend and colleague of mine. And just creating these communities in different ways and still working with Riding on Insulin as well. I think the biggest thing that I've taken away is that, we feel so disparate in these parts of our lives. But there is this opportunity for us to kind of seamlessly weave them all together. We can't really compartmentalize our lives. We can really try, like, I'm going to come home, I'm not going to think about work. That is for what I do at the office, and this is for my family. Yeah, I think that's one mentality. But what's really worked for me is to just have boundaries. That was a big one, but also not be afraid to allow all parts of my life to really intertwine. And when something doesn't fit, that's usually something to do with me. That's something I've got to sit with, and I've got to be like, okay, what's not working? And so just integrating these teachings, and you can listen to the podcast. It's 10 episodes, specifically the yamas and the niyamas, applying each of those to our life and business. And it's just powerful reminders that I use every day. And if you've never heard of the Yoga Sutras before, it's okay. You don't need to know anything about Sanskrit or yoga. It's just really powerful principles that you'll find even woven through lots of different spiritual and different traditions, even within the self-help world as well. So yeah, that was a long answer, but I
That's
think that
okay.
also weaves in a lot of my
Of your
journey.
story. Yeah, I love that. Well, the one thing that first stuck out to me, and I think will resonate with people listening, especially in the area of travel, where I focus in sustainable travel and community-based tourism, and with a lot of colleagues who are giving back through their travel businesses, the idea of not being able to be cutthroat and give back at the same time, or not being able to, much like you said, of hearing that powerful sentence, like not thinking that it's okay to earn money if you're trying to give, that somehow those things can't be, they can't go together. And also hearing you say that if you're not being able to sustain what you're doing because you're just giving, then it's going to go away and no one's going to benefit from it. I feel like
Mhm.
that's a huge permission slip to be able to say, we have to do this. It is a business. And I
Mhm.
think also, I think listening to your podcast, but thinking about like that money is an exchange of energy, right? And so for me, this is a huge space that I've spent focusing on is I am putting my energy out and I'm putting my love out and I'm putting my time out. And the way that our society like returns that is the energy of money. And I
Mhm.
think that that is something too where if you look at things through this perspective you can find some ease with whatever that guilt thing is
Right.
associated between earning money for giving love.
Well, and I actually think it's something you said right before I started talking, which was this like masculine energy, right? That we often experience with business. I think like to encapsulate all of it, it's so powerful that point because masculine energy and feminine energy, irregardless of gender identity. We're talking about just two types of energies and they complement one another. One cannot exist without the other. And actually, the word yoga means union or to yoke, bring together. And really, what we're doing in yoga, whether it's philosophy or asana or breath work, whatever, we're bringing together these two parts of ourselves, this masculine and feminine energy. And you hit it on the head. Like, we're in this masculine dominated world, right? You're like, I'm getting into business. I need to make budgets and I need to bring in money. And like, I need to somehow convince my partner that this is a good idea, right? I know that's another thing. But once we figure out this feminine piece, and, especially as someone who identifies as a woman and really has been, for me, I've been dropping a lot into this feminine energy and really feeling the energy and being able to sit with it and recognizing the receiving is not always money but also receiving joy, right? Like I know people that are teaching yoga and have never wanted to get paid and that's feeding them. That works great. And then also people who start yoga studios or any business, in order to pay the bills there has to be money coming in, but also there has to be joy
Mhm.
because there can be tons of money and no joy. So money is just like you said, and like we say, a form of energy. And so all we're doing right there is just balancing that feminine energy of like receiving and then this masculine outward energy of giving. And as long as they're somewhat in balance, on a day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year basis, then we're going to find some of that balance in our life. Totally.
Yeah. I just it makes me so happy to think about things in this context. So I really appreciate you sharing that. You mentioned when you were telling us a bit about your story, kind of your transition out west and then moving to Whitefish. And this is kind of the beginning of your off grid journey. But I would love for you to share a little bit more about how that happened for you. I think this is something that when I share about you, people are very interested and curious about. And not a lot of us have had this sort of experience. Even someone growing up in Montana and like camping and spending all that time, that's one thing, but committing your lifestyle to this is another. So
Camping.
yeah.
Yes.
So I would love to hear like what sparked that for you and then what kind of made this a goal for you to set out and create this lifestyle.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to answer this question. So, oh my goodness. So, I will start off by saying in my blood and bones is a deep love for the outdoors. I went to summer camp every year for like 15 years growing up. I worked at a Girl Scout camp for many years and attended camp. I worked at Camp Manitowish YMCA camp in northern Wisconsin, leading trips. And so the outdoors is I just love it. I love it so much. And what was really interesting, like I mentioned briefly, is like I had kind of gone away from the outdoors to pursue a career. But actually, that's what happened. And I was like, no, like I actually remember writing in a journal one time, I don't think I can make a career out of camp. And I'll never forget it because I truly believed that. And we talked about that as staff at camp, like, well, eventually I'm gonna have to go get a career, there's this idea of like a career, but then also like, camp is just something you do from time to time. So when I met Sean is a professional snowboarder, backcountry snowboarder. So at the time, and even now, not less with COVID, but he had been traveling the world on these snowboard expeditions, climbing up mountains, with no chairlifts and snowboarding down them. And I mean, it was a really steep learning curve, pun intended, for me, who was a skier. I'm going to go skier at the time from Wisconsin, really to get up to his ability level. Learning how to ski from your partner is a whole other story for another podcast. But really, what brought us together was the travel experience, because of course, I'm always up for the adventure. And so we started traveling right away. Like I moved out west, and then a month later, he was going to New Zealand, and I was like, sure, I'll go, and let's go to the Cook Islands, and then let's go to Australia. And like my parents were like, what? And I was like, trust me, it's cool. And so that really, the travel bug really ignited something in me. And we experienced everything on that first trip. We got food poisoning together. We had to actually, it was so bad. We went to the hospital in the Cook Islands together. And I got to then land in New Zealand and meet amazing people, right? Like it was just mind blowing. If you can think back to that first time that you have gone, if you've had the privilege to go out of the country that you live in, that first time, like I'd gone to Canada, but it was before passports were even needed. So this was my first time on a 14-hour flight. And I was like, whoa, whoa, like everything was new, and like taking pictures and meeting people. And what's so cool is like we have met so many people on our travels. I've been to 5 continents myself with Sean. He's been to 7 continents, almost 2 times each, all of to ski and snowboard. And so the off-grid stuff, when it really started to happen, was we decided to go to the Yukon territory of Canada. And this was in 2012, I believe. And we wanted to take this expedition there's not a lot of towns in the Yukon. If you've ever been there or driven through on the Alaskan Highway, we flew up to Whitehorse, and we stayed at this little cabin in the woods. And it was totally what we call dry cabin. So no plumbing, no water. You've got a little, wood stove that heats the place. You cook on the wood stove. You use an outhouse. You like bring in these jugs of water. And I just remember getting there, and I had no idea what to expect. This was something, not that I didn't want to go, but again, Sean is he finds these places that are just like, what? I have no idea how he does it, but I'm really fortunate to be able to tag along. And I was like up for the challenge. And so we had to like manage how much water we had in these jugs. And then the people who own the place were like, yeah, let us know if you need more water. We'll bring over a jug. And it was like as simple as that. And I remember we were sitting in the cabin looking outside, and the Northern Lights were happening. And I was like, we're in this cabin with no plumbing, no running water, and it's great. And we both looked at each other and we were like, we could do this. We were playing Uno. We love Skippo or Uno, one of those like silly card games, which we still play to this day. And I was like, this is amazing. And I had no idea how we would possibly do that. But, it was fun to talk about. Like, yeah, we could totally do this. And then we did a little bit more traveling, and we decided to go to Kyrgyzstan. And this was, I believe, at the end of 2012. And we were married by this time. We got married in 2011. Pretty soon, we met in 2010, got married in 2011, and then did all this really big travel in 2012. And we went to Kyrgyzstan, which is in Central Asia. It's one of the most mountainous countries in the world, which is what drew Sean to it. And we had connected with some people. And we decided we actually wanted to do a little bit of giving back. So, yes, I was still Riding on Insulin at the time, but, we took a little vacation time in order to bring over skis and snowboards to this really amazing community in a place called Arslanbab, Kyrgyzstan. And they were working on getting ski and snowboard tourism going in order to support the economy of this town. And so we brought over a bunch of snowboards and solar panels and Osprey backpacks, and from all these sponsors that Sean and I worked with at the time. And really what we realized on that trip was like, wow, it is so cool to give back to places where you travel, and to not just like, this is a mentality that I have today that one of my teachers, brought up. And like, we go on these vacations from our life to get away from our life. And then by the time we get halfway through the vacation, we're already dreading returning to our life right? This is what we do. And man, going on this trip and being able to be there with these kids, we didn't speak any of their language. That was just not something we had time to learn before going over there. We knew a couple words, but the language of skiing and snowboarding is a language that we speak, and it's universal. And to be able to see the smiles on these kids' faces, like, I'm not joking, there was no chairlift. They insisted that we ride these horses and get up to the top of the ski hill. There was a whole train of kids behind us walking, pumped to walk, right? And we were like, no, like, just going along, and they were just like, no, this is what we do. And we were just on this adventure, and seeing these kids' faces when they strapped into their snowboards. We had, Sean had helped put these bindings on. They had received this, a couple shipments of this stuff from another gal who had gone over previous to us, and we kind of completed this collection of things that they needed in order to snowboard and ski. And it was amazing. We got to ski in backcountry ski and snowboard in the world's largest walnut forest. We got to see yurts, or gur, as they call them over there, and life in the round. That was a whole new thing for us as well. And we still keep in touch with a lot of these people that we met over there. And that just really showed us, like, we had been kind of ski and snowboard and like working with sponsors, and it almost was becoming this like business, right? And this documenting of our trips. But at that point, we were like, whoa, travel is so much more than just traveling for ourselves, right? To be able to give back to a place. So I think that really got us excited about it. Then when we moved to Whitefish, Montana, we specifically were looking for a property where we could move off grid. We found, a home on 10 acres. And so it was like a starter place where we could live while we built this off grid space. And we built a yurt. And that was an experience. Neither Sean or I had any building experience pretty much at all. Like, my dad was a carpenter growing up for like kind of a side job. And so I think I had it in my blood, but Sean, not so much, although he learned way fast. And so did I. And we built a yurt, which is like a kit, we learned how to build a platform. And then the following year, we built a tiny home or a small cabin. And we got to do that and just learned so much. Building a home is like building anything. And the people that you build that home with you have to work as a team. And they say, like, this, one of the second most biggest causes, I don't quote me on this, but somebody told me this one time, like, they're like the second cause for divorce in the US is building a home together. Not even physically building a home together, just like hiring somebody to build a home. And I think for us, the partnership that we had, we had some big obstacles at that time in our life, and we were also building this home. And after we built that, and we were living off grid, so no plumbing, we created our own power from solar. No, like I said, no plumbing, no running water. We were hauling in all of our own water. We would snow machine in the winter because it was too steep of a road to plow. So we really got to experience this for years in Montana. But like, as Sean will say, this was like our starter home, our starter homestead before moving to Alaska, because it was something he always wanted to move to Alaska. And like I said, I've never been closed down to moving or adventures. And once I saw Alaska, I was like, whoa, like, whoa. Just the culture of people in Alaska. Alaska is really huge. You should look at a map overlaying Alaska and the rest of the US. It's like, driving from Montana to Texas or something. It's huge.
Mm.
But getting to see these different parts of Alaska and getting to be in a place where off-grid living isn't weird. Not that I don't mind being the weird kid. I always kind of have been, going to summer camp every year, loving getting dirty and whatever. But in Alaska, not everybody lives off the grid, but homesteading and off-grid living, it's a way of life. Obviously people and have been doing this for so long. And so to be able to be in a place where not only can we feasibly make this happen, but also have so many folks to mentor us in the ways, because there's so many more obstacles in Alaska than there were in, Whitefish, Montana is like a small town, but like way more urban than I would consider anything that we do, here. There's a Lowe's, there's a Costco like right there within, 20 minutes of Whitefish. And so moving to Alaska, that's where we really it's like everything prior to that moment gave us the tools to do what we did here, especially at Arctic Hive. Buying a plot of land in the Brooks Range, 7 hours from the nearest town. I mean, I don't think I ever thought it was like crazy or beyond our means. And again, there was a place Sean found, and he had been watching the Brooks Range for years prior to us ever moving to Alaska. And he was like, "Hey, let's go look at this. Look, there's a piece of property for sale." And so we went up and we looked at it, and there's no realtors. We strapped on our backcountry skis. Sean strapped on his split board. We skinned out to this property. We had to have metal detector with us to find the property markers. And we kind of had to get a lay of the land all by ourselves because we could have worked with a realtor, but I'm pretty sure they didn't want to drive the 14 hours round trip just to sell us a plot of property. So we went out there right away. It was just like when you feel it, and that's the other thing in business and in all the places that we've, homesteaded or bought property, we've always felt it. That feeling when you go somewhere, even like regardless of all the obstacles you have to overcome to either buy that property or build on that property, you just get there and you're like, this is it. This is it. Like, I am prepared to do whatever it takes to make this happen. And so we drove back to Fairbanks after that trip, met with this woman who has owned the property for generations, and sat with her at a Wendy's and said, "We'd like to buy this." And so she sold us the land in Wiseman, Alaska. It's a tiny village of anywhere from 12 to 20 people. It's a former mining community. It's the subject, if anybody wants to read a book, there's a book called Arctic Village, written by a guy that traveled there, Bob Marshall. You might also know that name. He wrote this book about Wiseman Village, and it's this happiest little utopia. And it's from like a long time ago, but the vibe still rings true. It's this magical place in the Brooks Range, and starting out to build that. Again, everything we had done prior to this point prepared us for what we were going to do. And we knew we had to do it in stages. We didn't know what we were going to build in stages, but we wanted to bring people there. We had gotten that bug of bringing people to Whitefish, Montana when we were there. Even with Riding On Insulin, which we still do, we do these for the nonprofit, these coaches camps where we bring a bunch of adults with type 1 diabetes to these amazing locations like Whitefish, Montana. And we do a whole week of skiing, snowboarding, leadership, facilitation, building skills, and working with kids. And so that had been going on. I'd run a couple yoga retreats on our property with the yurt and everything in Whitefish. And I was like, I want to bring people together. This is what we do. So moving to Alaska, we built it in stages. We built our first structure in Wiseman at Arctic Hive, and it's a dome. We call it the igloo. It's a 20-foot dome. It's a kit. So again, starting off with a kit, anybody who wants to build off the grid, starting off with a kit structure is the easiest. You learn how to build a platform, which, by the way, is a whole other thing because we live on permafrost up in northern Alaska, and which means that there's ice below the tundra. The tundra is like this warm blanket over, well, not warm, but like a blanket of sorts that lays over the earth. And then there's frozen ground underneath that. So people are like, well, are you going to dig a well someday? No, we can't, because there's like a whole bunch of ice underneath us. And so building on permafrost has just been an amazing experience. Sean is like the most amazing researcher in the world. And so he is like this like logistical researcher, and he's like, okay, this is what we need to do. And then my role is like, okay, how are we going to make this happen? Like logistics, packing, finances, like that's my strength. And then when we both get there, like putting it together and actually building, I mean, that is just team building. That is straight up like summer camp material is what we had to go through. And and we really had to look at it just like that, right? Like getting to see someone in all stages of frustration while you're building a home. You just have to be willing to walk through that fire over and over again and like work on your relationship while you're building. It's crucial. This is why people crumble under these, and there's no shame in things crumbling, because also destruction is part of any relationship, any business, any whatever. So it showed us a lot about each other. We made a lot of mistakes in not mistakes, but like, we went through a lot of stuff in Montana the first time around when we built the yurt and the cabin. And I really felt like in Alaska, it was like our do-over. Like we had done it and we wanted to do it again in a place where there was no other people. And at the time we had filmed for the cabin, we had filmed with Discovery Channel for it's a show called Building Off Grid. So we had cameras on us too, like to aggravate everything. So when in Wiseman, there were no cameras. We were fortunate enough to have a couple amazing friends fly up, help us with the project. That was great too. And it was really our chance to do it on our terms, to work as a team, to figure out what it took. And so we built this dome. And then honestly, this is a great testament to detachment in business. We were supposed to bring out a huge group of 10 retreat attendees in March of 2020. We had it planned, ready to go. We were actually going to stay at a lodge in the village and then hike up to Arctic Hive to this dome we had built and do yoga. And then we all know what happened in March of 2020. So obviously that didn't happen. And that was an opportunity for us. We were so fortunate for it to be an opportunity. It didn't seem like one because obviously we had to refund all these people's retreat fees and cancel it and just say, what the heck are we going to do? Sean living with multiple chronic diseases and COVID being a very serious situation for anybody with, a situation like him, especially, we were like, we're not going to travel. And that was huge. We were on a track where we would really carve out at least 2 times a year where we were taking a 2-week immersion into another culture or another part of Alaska to ski and snowboard and to explore. And so for us to say, well, we're gonna just hang out here. Obviously you realize we're busy people, we just like to stay busy. We're like, what are we gonna do? So once we got everything under control, I actually had to close 2 of the yoga studios that I had opened in Montana due to COVID hardship. That was not fun. And, we just kind of relooked at how can we figure this out in a way to still continue on our path. And we thought, well, if we're going to be in Alaska for the indefinite future, let's build Arctic Hive. And so that's what we did. We built 3 12 by 12 cabins. Now we built like a 12, I can't remember our Montana cabin. I think it's 12 by 20 that we built in 3 months. One, it's like 2 stories. We built 3 12 by 12 cabins in, I'll say 4 to 6 months, but really the building of them, the raising of them was 2 weeks, all 3 of them. And I have never done something so dramatic like that. The sense of accomplishment I can't even think about. We hand hauled all of that material from where we park in the village. We had to hand haul it up to Arctic Hive. In the winter, we snow machine in, but in the summer, we can use wheelers sometimes, but to preserve the tundra and the permafrost, it's way better if we carry things. So 75 sheets of plywood on my back, carrying them up this hill, we almost broke ourselves, but we didn't. And the sense of accomplishment and also just the ability to really have your hands on all the material and getting to learn 3 times in a row how to build. So we hand built everything on Arctic Hive. Flash forward, we built a dome this last summer, a geodesic dome specifically for yoga. It's the yoga studio or the Zen Den, sometimes we call it. And it just really completed the property. We have a 4th cabin that we finished this year. And so now we have 4 guest cabins. We have the igloo, which is our common space. And then we have our geodesic dome, which is the yoga space. And so we have future plans, but living off the grid, it's really inspired by travel and then really inspired by basically paying forward the experience that we got in Kyrgyzstan. They showed us a way of life that we felt so fortunate to see. And then getting to know the way of life here in Northern Alaska, because again, we're both newbies to Alaska compared to so many locals here who have lived here their whole life. And so getting to experience this way of life and then steward others into learning about the Arctic, why it is ground zero for climate change is so important to learn about, because honestly, people have to see it to appreciate it. We know this, right? If you don't know it exists, how can you appreciate it? But what's going on in the Arctic should concern the entire planet. And so if we can bring people in a small, sustainable way up to a place like Arctic Hive where you get to see the Northern Lights and you sit right under the Aurora Oval. So really the Northern Lights during, about August 21st to April 21st, they're out every night. It's just a matter of how strong they are, whether there's cloud cover, etc. And so to be able to be in that magical place and be comfortable, because again, we were made so comfortable in places like Kyrgyzstan and even in that cabin in the Yukon. If you're comfortable, you're not worrying about your survival. You're not worrying about where your water's going to come from or whatever, but you're off grid and you're experiencing that. And then you can look around and say, oh my gosh, this is worth preserving. This place is important, because it is. And there's a lot that is threatening the Arctic at this moment. And if people don't know about it, they're not going to know that it needs help. It needs our help. So anyway, again, the long version of how I became an off-grid home builder and retreat center owner. So.
Yeah. No, I love it. I'm entranced. So I am so grateful for every moment that you shared. And I love so much thinking about that version of you, like, how can summer camp be life? No way that's happening. And now you're like, I totally get to live that every day. And not only that, but like in this place that people can't even really convey, and like in their mind they can't even imagine what that would be like. And you kind of painted the picture of what this living is like, talking about for those of you that aren't familiar, this 7 to 9 hour drive depending on road conditions, all the way from Fairbanks, just to get where you can park and then getting to the property. And so for people who want to travel, like knowing getting there is an epic part of the journey, right? Like this is part of the process, which I think is also so magical when you can then bring in like your yoga lens. Is like, it's not about like us flying to Fairbanks, driving 20 minutes to our convenient retreat, like having this moment, like this is going to be a commitment you're making to yourself simply to get there, right? And how can we use that as a part of our journey and the experience? And so I love that that is like literally baked into what it's going to take to be in this journey. And then even like you get there and you're like, okay, phase 1 complete. Now we were going to get to the property, and what's that going to look like? And for you in your daily life, like for you listening, follow Arctic Hive, follow Mollie of the North on Instagram, because seeing these videos all the time of what it takes to live are amazing.
It's so funny to like normalize some of these things, because I don't even think, like in the beginning, I would call my girlfriend. I have these 5 girlfriends from home that I'm super close with, and I would call them and they'd be like, so how do you shower? And I was like, in my head, I was like, what? Like, oh, right, this is different. And you normalize so many things about this way of life. But what you said, it's like, this is not a vacation from your life. This is like an immersion in an entirely new way of life. And it helps you put into perspective the things that really matter, because we can get all worked up. If I got worked up about my commute from the grocery store or from the hospital back to where we live to home in Arctic Hive, if I got all wrapped up and worked up about that, there's no way I would ever make it. Like you said, 7 to 9 hours. There's times when there's semi truck. It's primarily a road service, as we call it, the haul road or the Dalton Highway, and it's primarily a bay at the top of Alaska, from Fairbanks to there. And so there are semi trucks that sometimes took like 15 hours. This was this day like earlier this year where the road was just so bad. So I can't remember if it's like weather. It was weather, but also road conditions, slick conditions. Trucks need chains. It's like it can take anywhere from, sometimes it takes 6.5 hours, 15 hours to go just halfway on their journey. Like we just go halfway up the road to get to Arctic Hive. So yeah, it's all about the experience, and you just learn, like, you just let it go. If I get stuck here, okay, I'm prepared. I've prepared for this. I've planned for this. And then we just flow with whatever happens.
Yeah, I love it. It seems just like this perfect, like you said, every part of your life brought you there and enabled you to be there. Like you couldn't have gone from Wisconsin to Arctic Hive. You just wouldn't have succeeded. And I think that's so important too for so many listening, both from an entrepreneurial journey and just a life journey. Like we cannot get where we're going without getting there. Like this is the part of the journey as we end our call, because I can't believe that we've chatted for almost an hour, which I
Oh
wish
my
I
gosh.
probably had like 2 or 3, because we could share so much more. I do want to let listeners know, like, they have an opportunity to join us for a Lotus Sojourn in March of 2023. And I'm so excited. This feels like kind of full circle for me in my yoga journey, to be able to get to come up there and enjoy your property and bring people to this like magical destination to experience this off-grid living, but also to learn about that lifestyle, to visit the village and learn from locals, and to just kind of be fully immersed, like you said, not to disconnect from living, but to like become fully present in living. And so I'm really excited. People, if you're listening, on March 7th is when this is going to be officially launching and open for booking, but you can get on our wait list now. So you can reach out to me via my website, and you'll get to meet Mollie in real life and get to enjoy all of these cool things that we've been talking about. So, but before we end, I would like you to just share for others that might be interested in visiting Irick Hive or hosting their own retreat, how they can find you, where they can find the podcast that we talked about at the beginning of our call. And then we're going to end with our rapid fire questions.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So if folks want to get, I would love to hear from anyone. My handle on Instagram is Mollie, Mollie of the North. And then Archive is Archive AK, and it's Arctic. There's 2 C's in Arctic. And then our website is archive.com. You can see we have retreats and also yoga teacher trainings, immersions, both 200 and soon to be 300-hour trainings, both online and up at Archive. And then also, yeah, if you want to get in touch, I would love to just hear from anybody, any questions you have. Yeah, and then the podcast is called The Yoga of Business. You can search my name, Mollie Busby, in any of your podcasting apps. You can listen to that. And yeah, I'm just so thankful. Thank you so much for having me. This is it's just so fun to chat with people about travel. So
Thank you. And I also just wanted to quickly mention, for those of you interested in the yoga aspect as well, Mollie did mention you can take classes virtually, which I love. And for people either new to yoga or who have a yoga practice, I would strongly encourage checking it out, because for me, I had been doing yoga for, I don't know, a very long time before I walked into Yoga Hive, and was greeted so warmly in that community by Shell, and felt what I had been waiting to feel from yoga. Like I had this notion that it was more than like you said, the poses you were putting yourself in. Like I knew there was, and had like a few teachers that like sprinkled in this, the spirituality of it, the like the personal discovery, and I was like, that is what I want. And so for people that might be curious about that magic, I would just highly recommend it. Like doing yoga with Mollie, my very favorite thing was that the very first like 2 classes, I don't even think we were seated the whole time. And I'm like, this is yoga. I'm like, oh, this is my yoga. Like the breath work and the mind work and the like centeredness, like it just was magic. So I just want to give a shout
that's
out
awesome.
for that, because it really like it created something different in my life, and I would love for it to allow that to happen in someone else's life as well. Okay,
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
rapid fire questions, rapid fire ish. I'll always add the ish because it's there. What is your favorite book or movie that offers you a travel escape or inspires you to adventure?
Oh, oh my gosh, I'm thinking only Arctic related things. Um, well, Okay, so another podcast recommendation. Learning about the Arctic. There's a podcast called Threshold, and it is a really I think there are a couple different seasons. Really powerful perspective on the Arctic in general, all around the world, and the issues that are facing the people of the Arctic. It's amazing. It's so good. It's called Threshold.
And then this isn't something I normally ask, but because you are you, how about your favorite yoga book? Or for someone that wants to tap into that deeper level, what would you say you have to read to just begin that journey? Can you even do that?
I have an entire massive like pile of books in front of me right now. Um, oh, if I just had to pick one book, okay, let's go simple. You'll probably agree with this. There's a really lovely book if you want more about the yamas and the niyamas. Everybody who knows me knows I love philosophy. I love poses and breath work and practice, don't get me wrong, and meditation. But philosophy is like my passion. And so it's called The Yamas and the Niyamas. It's by Deborah Adele. It's so short and it's just these like, it's kind of like my podcast where we take these short little quips and then talk about how do we apply this to our daily life. It's one of the assigned books for our 200-hour training in yoga, and it's so good. It's a
Yeah,
really good book.
I fully agree. And I was hoping you would say that one, but there were so many that we read that were good. And we read that in my Lotus book Sojourn last year. And everybody was like, can we just stop here and read this book over and over and over again? Because
Yeah.
every page you're just like, oh, that too. And
Oh, good.
it's
I
so good.
know.
Yeah. Okay. So highly recommend that. What is always in your suitcase or backpack when you travel?
Oh, an AeroPress coffee maker. I traveled for Riding on Insulin just recently. We're running camps throughout the month of January, and I brought this travel AeroPress. I think it's made of plastic, but it's like kind of a French press, but really compact, makes amazing coffee. That is one. And then Montana, we actually have this at Irick Hive too. Organic grizzly blend from Montana Coffee Traders. I have yet to find I'm not opposed to Alaskan coffee, but man, my heart is with Montana Coffee Traders. That coffee is my favorite. So I travel with it actually all the time.
This conversation is making me sad. I normally go to Whitefish every year for my birthday, and I'm not this year. And I'm like, oh,
Ah,
it's kind of killing me a little bit.
yes.
What has been your favorite destination?
Oh, favorite. Okay, well, that's actually easy. It's the first destination that Sean and I will go to when we feel like we can travel internationally again. It is Northern Norway. It's like, can't believe I haven't mentioned it yet, but it's basically the most magical place. Like, other than home at Arctic Hive in the Brooks Range, if we said we had to move anywhere in the world, we would probably move to Northern Norway. And just being able to backcountry ski there and the mountains in the Lingen Alps and then going down to Lofoten and all of these places. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to go back. It's amazing. And we have so many dear friends who are up there as well. And to be able to see them and break bread with them. And oh my gosh. And the skiing is outrageous in the backcountry there. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Thank you. I love that. I'm like, I would have never had a desire, and I'm like, oh, maybe I really feel like I need to see that now.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
What do you eat that immediately connects you to a place you've been?
Um, well, that's a good question.
As
Trying
we
to
know,
think.
Montana coffee, but maybe.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm trying to think internationally. Something that we eat. You know, I'll, this doesn't really connect to, okay, food is like really important to me, and I love cooking. So I'll kind of go a different way. My favorite cookbook, that's what's coming to mind, is Minimalist Baker. She's my favorite on Instagram. Her cookbook is huge. It has such good recipes. They're like 10 ingredients or less. Lots of plant-based recipes, which I love as well. That for me, food is life. And I use that cookbook to cook for I do all the cooking at Irick Hive. And so for me, food right now is all about being at home, not necessarily anywhere else in the world. And so that cookbook is like, and her Instagram account is like my go-to for creating really, really good, nourishing food for us and for our guests.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I feel like that is going to be one of the like really valuable experiences of that journey is for because I know the love that you put into everything and for people to be able to nourish themselves with that food during that experience, I think in and of itself is going to be something that is a real special experience. So um
Yes.
who was the person that, well, I think we know the answers to this, but who was the person that inspired and encouraged you to set out and explore the world?
Yeah, you do know this. My husband, Sean, uh, yeah, he was the one that was like, "You want to come to New Zealand?" And I was like, "What? Okay, let me look at a map quick and get a passport." Yes, it's
Yeah,
Sean.
I love that. I'm so happy having this conversation to learn what that really has meant in your life. And if you could take an adventure with one person, fictional or real, alive or past, who would it be?
Mm, you know, I okay, this is like kind of sentimental. I would probably have my dad up here, and he's a real character, but he has Alzheimer's. And so we took some amazing trips before he was unable to travel anymore. But if I could, he really had a huge hand in, he helped us build the yurt. He helped just kind of with the whole Montana homestead and never was able to come up to Alaska and won't at this point. But it would be so cool. And I'm sure on some level he does know what we've done, but to show him just the carpentry work that I've been able to learn and do, because that's really what he did. It's what I remember him doing growing up. And so I just really feel deeply that connection with him. And so if I could, he's a real person, but it would be a fictional trip. But yeah, I think about him all the time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Uh, thank you for sharing this space with us today. I just love it so much. I feel like our listeners get to really know this why, like, I have this deep love for you, and your joy of living is infectious. And I so appreciate that I have been able to cross paths and share this with everyone else.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I love this. I love chatting with you and everybody out there. Your community I just know is so authentic, folks who are generally interested in learning and getting out there. Just these are the types of people that I like to surround myself with. So thank you for creating this community as well.
You're welcome.